Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub Podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. Marek, the news from Germany is that the post office is on the verge of extinction. No, I'm exaggerating. Everybody, what has happened in Germany is that Deutsche Post is rolling out a network of, or has installed a network of 20, they're not Packstations, Marek, I'm just going to double check the name, they're called Poststations, and these Poststations are Packstations with a little bit more. Now, Packstation is, of course, Deutsche Post DHL's classic red and yellow parcel lockers, and the Poststation is this locker with a little bit extra. So the ability to buy postage, which I think was a feature of the original Packstation, if I'm not mistaken, Marek.
Not sure, could have been, but I can't tell you, I'm afraid.
So, buy postage, lodge parcels, do many of the sort of the post office functions at 20 sites in one region of Germany. Kicked off in February. So, still very new, early days to see how customers will respond to it. And do I have a figure on how many doors? Between 18 and 106 compartments for each of the locker banks. And so obviously that's going to be going both ways. At some point you'll be lodging and collecting from those lockers. Marek, we've talked previously about the potential for parcel lockers to be enhanced to take on some post office features. What's your immediate sort of response to your take on this?
First of all, I haven't seen the machine in action, but my general feeling is that it's an interesting story with Deutsche Post, because if they're not the father, they're certainly the godfather of the locker, because a lot of the technology behind it was developed by them, and they have a patent that I think is still running till the end of this year, which is interestingly why InPost isn't in Germany. So for me, the big question is, shouldn't they first focus on perfecting the network they've got with lockers? Because at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, they have about 6, maybe 6,500.
6,500 is the figure that I've read, and they're aiming for, was it 12,000 in the next 2.5 years?
Yeah, but 2 or 3 years. And look, little old Poland, which is half the size of Germany and economically a dwarf, has 11,000 machines in Poland. And then you've got, Deutsche Post, the premium player, the leader in Germany, with 6 or 6.5. So something's gone wrong there.
I think the counter argument could be, now I don't have any insights into this, but just looking at the numbers, there are, in fact, I've got it right here, there are 11, no, that's not right. It says here 24,000 branches. Now, I think the number is something like 10,000 PUDO points across Germany. Perhaps they've been testing those PUDO points, looking at the ones that get the biggest volumes, and then looking at introducing parcel lockers at or near those sites. I mean, that's speculation on my part. We've talked about this before in our workshops, Marek, about testing with PUDOs before you install with lockers. So that's possible. Yet, sort of the flip side of that is, well, hang on, InPost doesn't have a big PUDO network, does it? They've just gone out there and just gone boom with lockers, and in a place with probably a lower labour rate too.
InPost did have a big network when they used to do postal services. I think they had 6,000 or 7,000. Now they've got about 1.5 to 2,000. But what's interesting is Germany is a high-cost labour market. They invented the concept, or at least was heavily involved in inventing the locker concept, and they've got so relatively few for the size of the country. And I think there's something wrong there, because lockers are nice, they are very efficient, they can deliver more parcels than a PUDO, they are open 24/7 if they're well placed. And my personal feeling, honestly, is step one should be that Deutsche Post focuses on really rolling out the lockers. And then, yes, okay, you can look at these more complex devices, but one thing that I've learned in all the locker projects I've done, the more complex the device, the more things that can go wrong.
You sound like somebody else I know, yes. The more complex it is, the more things that can go wrong. Now, we might also be looking at this from the wrong angle though, Marek. We're just thinking about this from a delivery perspective, whereas anybody inside a postal operator will say, okay, you actually have to look at things like your obligation under the law as to how many post offices you have and what constitutes a post office. So perhaps this is the first step towards Deutsche Post being able to say to the government, well, we don't have to have a staffed post office in order to meet the obligations to have a presence in a community. This might be the thinking behind all this. Or it could be that they're looking at, well, it's getting difficult for us to find partners for PUDOs or partners to run post offices, or we've got towns that have dwindling populations where it's no longer economically feasible for someone to run a post office either in with another business or on its own. There are all those sorts of considerations as well. But what I'd like to ask you about, Marek, is where you've put these machines and what will be the right sites. I would say just my gut instinct is it's not necessarily going to be the case that one post office could be replaced by one sophisticated parcel locker, a post station. What do you reckon?
First of all, you could be right. Bearing in mind that it's to serve the community, I would suspect that in some cases there's going to be a need for physical contact because perhaps elderly people may not feel so good with a machine. But let's assume that's the case. I think that would be a very valid argument. And then the locations, though, you would expect that sort of machine to be, first of all, in locations where it doesn't warrant having a physical presence. So it would be in the less busy suburban or perhaps even more likely rural areas. The second thing, you made a very good point, and what I could imagine is you have one, let's call it post office, which becomes the main point, and then satellite, let's call it automated post offices around. So there is relatively nearby an option for a live post office, but then satellites with automated capability would be available. So probably that's what I'd look at.
And that's not without precedent as well, Marek. In the physical post office world, there have been models where you have a principal post office and you have these feeder offices, shall we say, that have a limited range of services. But in terms of an automated alternative, shall we say, it might be all right. There are a lot of things to think about in terms of how you set up the network as well. Because if you then go from having one post office to having fragmented a ring of parcel stations or post stations, and you have to be servicing them for parcel pickup. What time do you do that during the day? How does that fit in with your existing waves for your mail collection and parcel collection from post offices, from your street posting boxes? I know I'm starting to sound like a cynical old logistics man now. But I guess what I'm getting at here is that it's not without cost, but if it means that you're offering a more customer-centric service, then it might be worth the cost.
Ian, and that is it. Imagine that suddenly you have a postal office or micro office that is open 24/7, that it's a bank holiday, you really need to do something, you can get it done. So I see benefits to it. The devil's in the details, so we'd have to really understand. Maybe somebody from Deutsche Post can drop us a note below and sort of say, hey, you got it wrong. This is what it's intended to do. Because I think it is an interesting concept.
It is an interesting concept. While we've thrown out plenty of theories as to what it might be all about, there might be something else behind it. One other quick thing to mention is that the next stage will include video chat via the terminal. I'm not sure how. I'm a little bit skeptical about that because in this day and age when most people have a digital device in their hand called a mobile phone or a smartphone, how useful will that be? But I guess sometimes you've got to try things to find out exactly what the usage is like.
Ian, that is a very good point. Can you imagine that you've got somebody who's really enjoying their video chat, spending 5 minutes chatting to someone by the screen, an whole queue of people? It makes it a lot of the disadvantages of a regular post office suddenly come to play. I can see much more, I would say, beneficial options, as you suggested, that use your smartphone. And I'll just add one thing. Problem with this machine is, guess what? You can't use a next-gen locker, the one without a screen, without power. So it makes it a much more expensive proposition. So interesting. It would be great if someone from Deutsche Post could enlighten us.
Oh, it'd be great to have a chat with someone from Deutsche Post about this. I'm sure there's a whole untold story behind this it's untold. So there you go. Marek, we've run out of time again. Marek Różycki, thanks for being part of the Last Mile Profits today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody.